So continuing with our Interfex Live video conference, we're here with Scott Watson from the CC Bond Group. Scott, why don't you talk to us a little bit about CC Bond Group and the things that you do there?
Thanks, Jeff. And I really appreciate the chance to get with you guys and talk about this. One of the great things about our industry is that we work with people who are thinking and doing really great things and also have the ability to do a lot of other things. And I think about my friend Russ Soma, who invited me to do this. I met him almost 25 years ago when I was a young sales rep for Eastman Chemical Company. So it's real fun to have a chance to come back and speak to you guys. So thanks for the invitation. So I've been in the API and business for a long time, and I learned a lot over the years in terms of companies who would acquire a lot of companies and try to serve the marketplace, much like you see Patheon doing today. And unfortunately, unless a company really executes well on an acquisition strategy, when they buy all these separate companies and agglomerate them, sometimes you lose what made the individual company great. So what we did was start a company, the CC Bond Group, which works primarily with privately held, great American companies that are strong in technology, American and European companies. And so our idea is to be able to provide technology from people we trust to customers in pharma and biotech. And that's the network of the CC Bond Group, anywhere from raw material chemicals to enzymatic transformations to lipids to pretty much across the waterfront into a specialty or biopharmaceutical company.
Excellent. So you mentioned you're doing a lot with APIs. In talking about that subject a little bit, what are some of the biggest challenges you see pharma companies having when it comes to sourcing those APIs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've seen, you think about when I started in the industry, now 25 years ago, most of the big pharma companies were very vertically integrated, and they were just beginning this thought of outsourcing. And then as we got into around the 2000s, the outsourcing really became a heavy factor, especially into Asia and India, to the point now that about 80% of our drugs that are consumed in the US are actually manufactured in India and China. And so one of the major challenges that we're seeing as a former board member of RX360 is safety and security of the pharmaceutical supply chain. And so, and cost really has kind of gone out of the equation. Many of the drivers that led us to Asia and India are now being reversed. As an example, labor rates in Asia and India are continuing to go up. There's a fair amount of turnover among the employees in those companies. You get a good bit of stability in the U.S. And all these things that I mentioned are of concern if you're an API procurement guy. You're very concerned about continuity of supply. You're very concerned about safety and security of the actual pharmaceutical that you're making. And one of the things that I think some of the big pharma guys occasionally lose sight of is the cost, as you know, Jeff, the cost of the pharmaceutical API and the drug product is usually less than 5% of the final price of the drug. So it's a very small percentage of the price. Pharma companies, Pfizer, Glaxo, and others, have primarily become some R&D with outsourced R&D in terms of acquiring biopharma companies. And then they've outsourced a lot of their manufacturing, and then they're a marketing company. And so what the API and the drug product folks are so important to these pharmaceutical companies, if they mess it up on the API and the pharmaceutical drug substance, they have the ability to really impair the brand of the pharma company. And I'm not sure some folks always think about how important that is. So that sounds very abstract. What do I mean by that kind of discussion? If we think about what happened with heparin now about 8 years ago, when the heparin came in that was adulterated, that had a big impact on Baxter because it ended up costing a number of lives of American consumers. And so, that was a cost. There's some cost issues there, but you really got to think about, the answer to the question. You got to think about the whole picture. You can't just think about the cost per kilogram. You have to think about the drug to my marketplace, and will I impair my brand by not having a safe and efficacious product. And who has more to lose than that is the big pharma companies. So I think those are some of the challenges, is making sure they think about the whole big picture and recognize how the world has shifted dramatically. The other quick thing I'll add is, the U.S. asset base for manufacturing APIs is continuing to diminish. And so, frankly, there is not enough API asset base in the U.S. to manufacture all the drugs that we need in the U.S. anymore. And so a company that really wants to manufacture in the U.S. has limited choices. And so the companies that are wise, in my view, have really solidified and stabilized those relationships with the U.S. manufacturers and European that they have available to them. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. I think you brought up a couple of really critical trends right now that are really strategically a big part of the pharmaceutical industry when you look at the growth in contract manufacturing and services, and also just looking at supply chain from more of a strategic perspective. What are some of the best practices? Is it really just focusing on how to outsource things, or are there other things that pharma companies are doing to kind of tackle some of these challenges that they have when it comes to sourcing API?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of, even kindergarten kind of thought process here, but the companies that I think are doing a really good job of this, they enter into very long, much more strategic relationships than tactical relationships. The companies that I think are missing it are the ones that really focus in on just basically dollars and cents, and they don't think about a strategic long-term relationship. The reason the strategic long-term relationship, in my view, is very important is, one, it gives you continuity of the people that are working for your product. That's important. Two, if you're developing new products, if you have a long-term relationship with the client and you bring them a new product, you kind of immediately get cued to the head of they just know you're a great customer. If I think about, I work for Ampac Fine Chemicals, and they have a very much of a marquee customer that when that customer calls, I have several of them, gratefully for them, but when those customers call, those marquee customers call, I'm not saying that the other customers are shunted aside, but if you're a new customer trying to get into some of these really great companies that have certain technologies that are not widely available, it's best to have an ongoing long-term win-win relationship. So I think going back to things like just thinking win-win, long-term, and then also finally kind of being, one of the things I think we'll talk about is just the interfacts, the value of DCATs and interfaxes and infomexes in these meetings, is there are some things, things are changing. It's not a static orientation. So going to these kind of meetings gives you a chance to kind of say, okay, I'm working with these guys, this client's been great, but is there something else new that I need to be aware of? And I think that's important.
Absolutely. We talked about some things beforehand. You made some interesting points here in talking about China and India. I think throughout manufacturing, people are always looking at those markets as opportunities, either for selling or for manufacturing and the cost benefits associated. Are you seeing any other geographical shifts? Is there any nearshoring that may be taking place in the pharmaceutical industry that would be helpful to know a little bit more about?
So certainly, we did a panel at Informex just a couple of years ago where we had several presidents of different API manufacturers, U.S.-based manufacturers, and the whole topic of the talks from the four individuals was the shift, this shift back to the United States. We have definitely seen that the energy. The changes in our energy prices, that we see at the gas pumps right now, we're all grateful for that. That helps. We've implemented the quality systems for the most part. We're operating at I'm talking about U.S. and European companies are already operating at extremely high levels of quality. So those costs are already baked in. Our labor rates are fairly stable in terms of pricing. So you're not seeing these exorbitant changes in labor rates. And labor rates, best knowledge I can see from both India and China, continue to increase at double-digit rates. And when you have the situation where people are moving around to capture a larger rate, so that causes some instability in your workforce. And so those are all things that I think are fairly significant trends that people just need to be aware of.
Sure. Is Mexico ever going to be a significant player, do you feel, or grow in significance in the coming years?
So I just have not had that much interaction with companies coming out of Mexico, and all the different companies I've worked with. I can only think of a handful of folks that are having significant operations out of Mexico. It seems like a natural,
Okay.
right? But just not seeing that much. At least I haven't. What have you seen? Have you seen what's been your experience on the Mexican side?
Just in some other industries, not so much pharmaceuticals, but just in some others. Again, you mentioned leveraging some of the energy prices and some of the proximity to the U.S. market. So we've seen some plastics companies, we've seen some automotive companies that have benefited from Mexican manufacturing. Just wasn't sure if that bled over here or not so much.
Yeah. One of the major things and I've been on Capitol Hill a number of times talking to our legislators, and we don't ask for a lot. Our industry, the chemical manufacturers, we really don't ask for a lot. We tend to ask for two things, and these are really not asked. We ask them to not put anything else on us, to just kind of let us operate under the rules that we have. We ask that the rules that we're held to be applied to our competitor countries overseas. If you're going to apply those rules to us, please apply those to them. That to try to level the playing field. And then finally, something that's probably you've heard about just over and over again, but it is the honest truth, is the corporate tax rates.
Yeah.
We've seen that, unfortunately, where we were competing as an American company in the APIs. We had everything lined up, nailed, but because of some differential tax rules, a European company would have an advantage, and that's kind of frustrating when you got the right technology, the right kit, the right everything, the right product, the closer, the proximity. It's an American company, and you may lose that business because of that last bottom line significant delta.
So, Scott, as the company has grown, what are some different things that you're looking to do to continue to expand?
Yeah, so we are real grateful for the relationships we have at the CC Bond Group, Optima Chemical Group, which makes raw materials, Grignards, a small manufacturer of APIs, Pharma Agro Labs. A couple areas that we're looking, Avanti Polar Lipids, world-class manufacturer of lipids, is NQMS quality management software system. Really neat. They actually did an implementation up in your area just a few weeks ago. Real neat company. Sustainable Chemistry Solutions, a biocatalysis company. The areas we're looking to add to our group is we'd like to add a larger scale API manufacturer into our group. We think that's very important. And we're also looking for niche fill finish companies. Fill finish companies that have a special expertise, maybe European companies or US companies that are not yet widely known and are looking to expand their markets. Those are areas that we feel like when we go visit biotech and small pharma and specialty pharma, those are areas that folks are looking for, and we just want to be able to help them solve their problems. So those are the areas we're looking to expand.
So, kind of winding up here a little bit, Scott, we're looking forward to Interfex. What are some of the things that you look forward to in going to the show each year?
Yeah, so I just think it's always fun, when you don't have any gray hair, Jeff, but when you get a few gray hairs, you've been around the industry a while, no matter where you go, you just run into people that you've had a cross connect with over a number of years. And so when you show up in DCAT or Interfex or these meetings, you run into people. You always learn something. I mean, I always learn something. I wasn't aware of that. I always like to see where the folks are going, right? Because even on LinkedIn and all these social medias, you can't keep track of where everybody's going. So it's always fun to catch up with people and see old friends. So and then just your customer relationships. When you go to these meetings, I saw this just a few weeks ago at a DCAT meeting where a very strategic customer relationship over many years, so many people had changed. The only way I found to really reconnect, and this is great what we're doing with technology now, but I'd certainly be happier to be sitting with you and having a cup of coffee up there in Wisconsin than over the phone. But that's when you go to Interfex and these kind of meetings, you just can't replace that kind of one-on-one time.
No, I think that's a common theme. That's a common theme. I think that's why the show continues to be so successful. And I've got 3 daughters, so I'm sure the gray hairs are only a matter of time. I'm sure those will be coming. So, Scott, thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the show.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your efforts, and thanks for the great questions.